My friend died in the woods, but it was much more than that. Point 1. It all began when one of my friend's parents gave him the keys to their lakeside cabin. He called us all up to tell us, as if suggesting a weekend vacation with just us guys. He asked me and my friends Charlie and Jonah to pack as much as we could, both as far as food and outdoor gear go. Michael has always been notoriously bad at packing for vacations, and he was aware of that fact. He was smart to ask us to pack, as the nearest town to this cabin was a good 15 miles away. Of course, Charlie and David were going. I knew they were, as they would never pass up a nature getaway of hiking, kayaking, and other outdoor activities. I knew that I would be going as well, because it honestly sounded nice getting away from the city for a bit. It was Jonah I was uncertain about. Jonah has never been the same since his girlfriend, Catherine, passed away in a car accident. Kathy wasn't actually in a car. She was walking after an argument with Jonah, and she was stricken by a drunk driver. Jonah was, of course, distraught. I still remember what he would say in a drunken stupor over and over again. I just want to see her again. Tell her I love her. Tell her I'm sorry. Jonah is the type of person to move mountains for his friends and loved ones, and it's understandable why he has never been the same. To my surprise, a while after David called me that day, Jonah was calling. "Hey Jonah, how's it going?" I answered. "Did David call you earlier?" Jonah asked. "He did. About that cabin. Are you going to be there this weekend?" "For sure. Been way too long since I've been on a good hike. Will you need a ride out there?" Jonah asked, not knowing that I've recently gotten a new vehicle. "Nope, I'm good. I recently got myself a new truck. Thanks though." "Great. Looking forward to seeing all you guys again. Till then, be safe, you hear?" Jonah said, a tinge of worry behind his voice. "I'll be safe. See you this weekend," I said before hanging up. After a few monotonous days of work drifted together, the prospect of the trip seemed all the more exciting, with the chance to see my friends as an incentive to get me through to the weekend. When I finally finished my shift on Friday, I grabbed all of my stuff, loaded it into the back of my truck, and hopped into the driver's seat before peeling off excitedly in the direction the GPS prompted me to. The entire 2-hour-long drive over, with music on my radio, I was drumming my fingers on the steering wheel, the call of nature bubbling a primal exuberance forth from my tired, overworked body. The entire drive was a slew of devolving roads, most of the time spent on asphalt, then gravel, and finally dirt. As my truck meandered along a dirt road, the tree line eventually relented to reveal the cabin, built well, overlooking a large lake. Parked outside of the cabin were 3 vehicles. They were all here already. Reaching into the back of his old red hatchback was Charlie. As he saw my truck parking, he tucked his large case of beer under the same arm he held his fishing pole in as he approached. "Mikey, you son of a bitch, you're late," Charlie said in a mock angry tone as I stepped out of my truck. Charlie pulled me into a friendly hug, letting out a loud, happy laugh. "How have you been, Charlie?" I asked, stifling chuckles within my words. "Oh, I've never been better," he said as he gestured to his surroundings and inhaled deeply. "I mean, just look at this place, man. The lake is beautiful, nothing but forest for miles. And don't even get me started on that cabin. It really is a sight," I responded, nodding. "Oh shit, where are my manners? Why don't you come inside?" "David asked me to bring you inside as soon as you got here," Charles said, gesturing toward the cabin door. "Sure, I'd love to check the place out." The sound of footsteps on coarse dirt and the orchestra of birdsong was joined in by the billowing wind and tapping branches. As we walked toward the cabin, I couldn't help but stop and think. It was that feeling where your mind shuffles through dozens of thoughts at a time, not quite zeroing in on a single one. "You coming?" Charlie's voice interrupted the thoughts my mind was spewing. Yeah. Sorry, got distracted by the surroundings is all," I responded as I followed him inside. As the door shut behind me, I was greeted with a pleasant smell and sound of clattering objects. "Yo, Charlie, any sign of Michael yet?" I heard David shout from the other room. "Nah, still nothing, Dave," Charles yelled back. "Well, he better get here before his food gets cold. I ain't cooking him nothing else tonight," David yelled, seemingly struggling with something in the kitchen. I took this conversation as my cue. I walked as softly as I could to the doorway I heard David's voice from. As I lurked around the corner, I could hear sizzling and clattering. I loomed back at Charles and could see he was stifling a laugh behind his hand, as he knew what I was doing. I leapt forward into the frame of the door, landing on both my feet with a pound against the wooden floor with my hands above my head like a monster pose. Row! I shouted as I landed. David's entire body jumped back in reflex. The contents of the pan leapt forth from their sizzling bed and onto the floor with a splat of brown, green, white, and gray. As David realized what happened, he slammed his pan onto the stove before clutching his chest. "You asshole!" he shouted, startled. "Huh, least I'm not an Eagles fan," I responded. "Oh, can it? Hope you're happy with a ham sandwich instead of one of my classic cheesesteaks." "Oh well, I think the look on your face was worth it," I said with a laugh. We pulled each other into a hug while we both laughed. "You got me good," David said as he began to pick up the stuff he dropped. "You got any clue where Jonah is?" I asked, looking around. "I think he should be in his room, unpacking right now." "All right, I'll see if I can find him." Jonah sat in his room, unpacking his stuff and organizing it onto the shelves and bedside table. I walked in quietly, knocking on the door. Jonah looked at me. Jonah was once an athletic, living fridge of a man, built of muscle and pure testosterone. This was not the Jonah I was used to. He had a forlorn look upon his face, and his body was no longer the Vitruvian structure it once was. It was thin and malnourished. The loss of Kathy clearly took a massive toll on him. "Hey dude," I said somewhat quietly. "Hey," Jonah responded. "How was the drive over?" I asked. "It was okay. It was a long drive," Jonah said, turning back to his items. "David is making cheesesteaks. You gonna go get one?" "Oh yeah. It's exciting, haven't had a real meal in a while," Jonah said. "Why don't you come on out, man? We're all here. Let's get a couple of brews, huh?" Jonah nodded and stood up. As he made his out to the hall, I patted his back and followed along. After we all sat down and had a beer and dinner together, I began to unpack all my stuff. David was helping. After I had unpacked everything and went back inside, Charlie suggested we go out by the lake and start a fire, and said that it would be nice to make s'mores and drink some more beer. As we all sat by the fire, Charlie handed us each a beer from his case. David cracked his open and took a sip. "Oh God, man, what the fuck is this dog piss?" He placed the can next to his chair and grabbed a Diet Coke out of a cooler next to his chair. Jonah and I instinctively put our cans down as well. "Suit yourselves," Charlie said, sipping from his can. As the fire crackled and the sun set, the wind picked up. The whistling wind and crackling branches filled the soundscape and overpowered all other noises. Once again, I was overtaken by my mind shuffling through thoughts once again. My final thought, and the one that my brain focused on, was of my mother whom passed away in the hospital when I was much younger. I couldn't focus on anything else. It was like my mind cramped and froze. My thoughts were finally broken by Jonah stomping to his feet and into the cabin. "What's wrong? Jonah?" David asked, standing up and focusing on him. Jonah didn't respond. I stood up and began to follow Jonah inside, gesturing at David and Charlie to stay out by the fire. As I followed Jonah, I could hear him inside his room. He was breathing very heavily on the other side of his room's door. I knocked. "Jonah, are you okay?" No response. All I could hear was labored, panicked breathing. I knocked again. No response. I took a second to collect my thoughts. I decided to try something that would either get him to talk or make him hit me. "Is it Kathy? Are you thinking of Catherine?" The breathing stopped. A few seconds of silence. I heard the doorknob turn slowly and the door cracked, with Jonah's tear-soaked face look through. "Huh, how did you know?" Jonah said through a shaky voice. "Just a hunch," I said. Jonah opened the door to his room, inviting me in to talk. "I'm sorry, something came over me," Jonah said, staring to the floor. "It's okay. I understand how you feel, man," I said, resting a hand on his shoulder. "I know, Mikey. It's just hard. It feels like whenever I feel as if I can return to normal, she comes back to mind," Jonah said through quivering words. "You'll never not miss them. It's how you hold on to their memory that counts," I said. "It just sucks. Her last experience on this world was an argument with me. I feel so guilty," Jonah said, releasing sobs in between words. "She knew you loved her, and we know that too," I said, patting his shoulder before standing up. "We'll go fishing tomorrow morning. All of us," I promised, slowly shutting the door. I could see Jonah reaching for a bottle of his favorite room temperature substance, vodka, wrapped in cheap plastic. It was around 10 at night when everyone said their goodnights. Jonah was still locked in his room, saying goodnight through the door, his words slurring. I went to lay in bed. All the lights in the cabin were off. As I laid in my bed, I couldn't help but switch between staring at the ceiling and playing games on my phone, which had no reception anyway. That's when I heard it, blustering wind pounding against the cabin and the wooden limbs of trees scraping against the outside. It went on, no end in sight. My mind shuffled through thoughts yet again, flashing me memories of my mother, my dog, even my bird, and times when I've done wrong by people. Eventually, my mind calmed. It was like someone was reaching into my brain and flashing me the moments that made me sad or angry or guilty. The soundscape of wind and scraping wood was interrupted by the slamming of the cabin's front door. Footsteps rang out on the porch, then onto the dirt, labored breathing accompanying the hurried sounds. "Kathy!" I heard Jonah yell, followed by a car door slamming shut and an engine turning over. I hurried out of bed, tripping over my blanket. When I opened my door, I saw David in the hall. "What the hell is happening?" he said, concerned. "I don't know. I think Jonah is having an episode." My words were cut short by a spray of dirt being heard hitting the outside of the cabin as Jonah's truck could be heard speeding off. Charlie opened his door, rubbing the sleep from his eyes. "What's going on?" he yawned. "Guys, quick, get some lights and a first aid kit," I yelled to Charlie and David. "Well, why?" Charlie asked. "Just do it," I yelled anxiously. Soon after, my anxiety came to pass. We heard a loud crash off in the distance. "Come on, we have to go get Jonah," David said, tapping Charlie as he passed him. We all leapt off the porch of the cabin and sprinted hard down the dirt road, lights in hand. As we sprinted, a horrific and worrying sight revealed itself from the obsidian dark. Jonah's truck was rammed into a tree, its metal crumpled and glass shattered, dripping with mechanical fluid. "Catherine, wait! Please!" we heard Jonah yell off in the trees. We flashed the lights into the trees and saw his broken and limping silhouette. Jonah clutched his arm, bone jutting forth from the soft, bloody flesh. His head had curtains of blood giving way to streams racing each other to his neck and shirt. He yelled again. "I'm sorry, Kathy. Please come back here." "Jonah," I yelled. I could not get his attention as it lied deeper into the forest. I rushed in front of Jonah, clutching his shoulders and looking into his eyes. "Jonah, Kathy is gone. You are hallucinating." "Jonah, Jonah." His eyes seemed stuck in a trance. Like a veil of hope and pain were draped over them like a silken cloth. He pushed me down on the ground with a strength I didn't know he would have in this state. "Don't keep me from her, Mikkel. I saw her. I know I did. She's out there," he said through gritted teeth, looming over me. His eyes fixed back into the forest before sprinting deeper into it at an unnatural speed. Charlie helped me back to my feet. "We have to go after him. Come on," he said, flashing the light on Jonah, running deeper into the woods. As we pursued Jonah through the dark forest, the sound of our footsteps were accompanied only by the natural noise of wind and crackling branches. The beams of light were our North Star, leading us deeper into the woods. We managed to keep Jonah in sight for a good while, but eventually we were all out of breath. Jonah sinking into the inky black our lights could not reach into. "That wasn't Jonah," Charlie said, worried. No, that was Jonah. He's just going through another episode. I thought he'd gotten over these bouts though," David said in response. I had an idea of what was going on, but I didn't want to sound insane. David and Charlie had never known the pain of losing a loved one, not even a dog. As we moved through the woods, twigs and dying leaves crunching beneath our feet, we noticed something strange. The leaves of the trees around us were a brackish gray. The ground was black as though it were scorched by flame, and the trees had dark, sinister bark. "What the fuck is wrong with this place?" David said, scanning the trees around us with his light. "Not sure. Looks corrupted, dead. I don't really know what to call it," Charlie responded as we pushed on. A deafening sound stopped us in our tracks. As we stood, backs to each other and close, we flashed our lights all around us. The deafening crack of trees snapping in the wind echoed through the night air. None of us could pinpoint where the sound was coming from. The ground rumbling near us, the distinct sound of roots ripping from the ground. Rising from the dirt, like a zombie from a cemetery, is the rotten and ripped corpse of a large deer, inanimate and bled dry. Oh my," David's exclamation was cut short by wet vomit creeping out of his body, sloshing against the dirt. "Damn, that's a big bug. What could have done this?" Charlie asked rhetorically. "Catherine, please," we heard Jonah exclaim from a distance. "Jonah, come on guys, it sounds like he's this way. Quickly," I said, before running deeper into the black forest. As we got ever so deeper into the forest, our surrounding blackened. Even with our lights, it was hard to see. Massive trees with black bark surrounded us. Bulbs of black sap protruded from the bark, resembling bulging black oil creeping its way from a nozzle. The deeper we went, the more I wished to leave. I could hear my mother's voice calling to me, saying what she said in the hospital. "I can't go on. There is nothing more they can do." Loudly, I could hear the yelps of my dog echoing into the night, and I could even hear the songs of my bird I once owned. Then, Jonah, I could hear him, like he was talking straight into my ear. "I just want to see her again. Tell her I love her. Tell her I'm sorry." What he said over and over again. Drunk, I felt dread, guilt. Snapping me from my thoughts was Charlie, yet again. "Guys, look." His finger and light were pointed at a sinister cavity of roots, black bulbs, and split earth. It descended into an inky black darkness that our lights barely could penetrate. Inside, we could hear Jonah, breathing heavily. "Jonah?" David said, fear trembling in his voice. I rushed in, walking at a speed that almost made me fall over. "Jonah, please, you have to hear us, man," I shouted into the darkness. Breathing was the only response. Standing in my light was Jonah. He was standing before something that gave me chills and caused distress to simply look upon. An obsidian black tree, its branches reaching into the ground above it, and its roots like bulging veins running beneath our feet. A singular eye as big as a basketball stared at Jonah from a knot in its bark. It was creaking and bleeding and oozing black matter that seemed like a primordial soup, of which Jonah drank from. "Jonah, please," Charlie pleaded, now crying. A split formed in the skin of this tree, unfurling in a foul cavity of splinter and deep-reaching flesh. "I'm coming to make things right," Jonah said, with a dark finality, before being pierced by what seemed to be a kind of wooden tongue protruding from the wooden entity's mouth. Blood rushed from the massive wound, its barbs digging into Jonah's back as if to drag him in. No! Charlie shouted, pain ringing out from his throat. I rushed forward to grab Jonah and keep him away from this thing. "David, break it!" David rushed forth, stumbling on his feet, and grabbed the thing's tongue. As David tried to split the tongue, he looked at his now wounded and helpless friend. I can't break it!" The entity shrieked as David attempted to break it and began pulling harder. "Quickly!" "I can't hold on much." I fell to my stomach, the ground knocking the wind from me. David stumbled against the wall. Charlie as well. I looked up. Jonah's limp body was fallen and slowly dragged into the darkness. Charlie tried grabbing him again, but he couldn't. Charlie was sobbing. "Jonah!" he said, before breaking down and morphing into a fetal pose, crying. The tree let out a guttural gurgle before its eldritch maw threaded shut, its eye closing. David scrambled to his feet, pounding on the wood of the tree. "No! You give him back! Monster! Demon beast fucking thing!" David bellowed, his fists pounding against the solid surface. "Guys, he's gone. Jonah is gone. We should go back before we are too," I said, struggling to my feet. David slumped against the tree. "Yeah, I guess. Come on, Charlie." Charlie was a mess of tears and clearly displayed pain. I can't." David hoisted Charlie to his feet, wrapping Charlie's arm around his shoulder, Charlie's feet dragging behind. The way back was a quiet, depressing walk. Charlie's sobs were the only thing breaking the sound of our footsteps. When we got back, David sat Charlie on the couch and immediately went to the kitchen. The sound of ripping cloth and glass bottles were ringing throughout the cabin. I asked what he was doing. "We're burning it. I will do it my fucking self if I have to," David growled through gritted teeth. "Yes, we will," I said, helping David. The rest of the night was us preparing to the sound of Charlie's hysteria. The next morning, we went out. We tried to find the tree, but we couldn't. We retraced our steps several times to no avail. Even his truck was gone. We decided to pack up and leave, informing the police and Jonah's parents that he was lost in the woods and that we couldn't find him. It didn't feel right lying, but nobody would believe the truth. David, Charlie, and I remained best friends. We were much closer now and spent our days helping others move on from grief or addiction. Jonah was addicted, and we didn't see the signs. A part of him died with Kathy the night of the accident. We were too slow to help him. Never again. David, Charlie, and I did whatever we could to help others with what Jonah was suffering from. Not that it made us feel any better. We miss Jonah and regularly talk about him even now. Once every year, we spend a weekend at the cabin with Jonah's room left as it was. We built him a sort of memorial by the lake, each of us gathering around it to say what we can to him. Every so often, out there, I see him, gesturing to me to follow him, but we know what that is. It isn't Jonah. It's the tree, attempting to bait us with our guilt, but we know better. Our friend is gone, and we all miss him dearly. If you ever find yourself in the woods and see what you have lost, please don't follow. This story was written by Fun Firefighter 429. 2 links for part 1 and part 2 will be in the description.